I am sitting in this cold courtroom, the air thick with the tension of a crumbling marriage. My eyes are fixed on Richard, my husband of 10 years, as an arrogant smile plays on his lips. As you say in the house did, a gesture believes leaves me with nothing. His laughter echoes in my ears, a hollow, triumphant sound meant to humiliate me. I think I am the naive woman I met, without ambition or resources of my own. I has no idea of the storm brewing, nor of the true inheritance I have kept secret. The judge is about to read my financial statement, and the anticipation burns within me. I will watch that smile vanish, as this belief replaces his arrogance. This moment has been planned with a patience I never believed I possessed. My name is Sofía, I am 38 years old, and this is the story of how one man's underestimation became my greatest strength. It is the story of an inheritance that goes beyond the material, one I could never see. Today, the truth will come to light, and it will not only change my future but redefine what I thought I knew about me. Every word the judge utters will be a blow to his ego, a reminder of his blindness. I remember the first time I saw him, his superficial charm hiding an insatiable ambition. I was an idealistic young woman, fresh to New York City, with simple dreams and an open heart. I came from a wealthy family, with connections and an impeccable reputation in the business world. It dazzled me with promises of a brilliant future, a world of luxuries I had only imagined. The house being disputed today was the symbol of his control, a gift that came with invisible chance. I saw it as his possession, another trophy in his collection of successes. But I knew that true wealth is not measured in square feet or bank accounts. It is measured in resilience, in the ability to rise and build something of your own. My inheritance was not only monetary, it was a legacy of strength, of ancestral wisdom my grandmother had instilled in me. A legacy that taught me to be discreet and to value what truly matters. While Richard revels in his anticipated victory, I feel a profound calm. The calm of someone who knows they have an ace up their sleeve, a card that will change the entire game. The silence in the room is almost palpable, broken only by the occasional murmur of the lawyers. My attorney, Therese, looks at me with quiet confidence, knowing our plan is about to be executed. The what has been long, filled with nights of doubt and days of tireless work. But every sacrifice was worth it. Every tear shed was an investment in my freedom. Richard believes this is his victory, the end of my past. But for me, this is just the beginning, the true start of my story. Let the game begin. I arrived in New York City from a small town in upstate New York, full of dreams and with a scholarship to study graphic design. My parents, humble artisans, instilled in me the value of hard work and discretion. I met Richard at a charity event in Manhattan, a gala I attended as a volunteer to design promotional materials. A was there for what I later learned was good for his image. Richard came from an old money family with real estate ventures spanning generations. He exuded a confidence that only comes from never having to worry about money. His first words to me were, "You don't look like you belong here," a comment I interpreted as a compliment. Now I know it was a warning, a sign of what our relationship could be. But his charming smile and the way he made me feel like the center of his attention blinded me. Our romance was a whirlwind of dinners at exclusive restaurants and spontaneous trips to luxury destinations. He introduced me to a lifestyle I had only seen in movies, a world of opulence and appearances. He seemed like the perfect man, attentive, successful, and, seemingly, in love with me. I, meanwhile, worked as a junior graphic designer at a small agency, enjoying my creativity and the satisfaction of seeing my ideas come to life. My hope was my passion, my identity. Richard, however, called my little hobby and often suggested it didn't need to work. Why exhaust yourself for pennies when I can give you everything? He was said to say, not understanding my need for independence. The marriage proposal came 6 months later, at a restaurant with spectacular views of the NYC skyline. The ring was dazzling, the champagne bubbly, and the moment, perfectly orchestrated. Our wedding was small but elegant, my choice despite his family's pressure for a lavish affair. It was one of the few times he stood my ground against the Sterling family's expectations. A modest wedding for a modest girl, his mother, Mrs. Sterling, commented with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was my first real taste of how his family viewed me. After our honeymoon in the Hamptons, we moved into Richard's luxurious condo in downtown Manhattan. Everything was sleek, expensive, and cold, much like his family. He tried to add personal touches, photos, and colorful artwork, but Richard preferred the minimalist aesthetic that showcased his beard. My identity was slowly fading in his world. The first signs of trouble appeared within months, subtle at first, but increasingly evident. The gilded cage was beginning to show its bars. The first few months of marriage were a confusing mix of luxury and loneliness. Richard questioned every decorating decision I made, criticized my friends, and made subtle digs about my career path. Graphic design is so common, I said after meeting some of my colleagues. You have the potential to be exceptional, but you're squandering it on logo designs for companies no one knows. He tried to fit into his social circle, the wives of other businessmen and executives who spent their days shopping at Egen boutiques or planning charity events. They were pleasant, but never truly accepted me. At a dinner party, I overheard one of them referring to me as Richard's experiment with the middle class. Instead of defending me, Richard suggested I try harder to fit in. Maybe you should update your wardrobe or learn to play tennis, I explained. They used me to see that you're making an effort to adapt to our lifestyle, as if my identity was something to be molded and corrected. Those early years were a whirlwind of expensive gifts and a growing sense that my self-worth was diminishing. Slowly, I was becoming what Richard wanted, a trophy wife who reflected well on him. The independent, creative woman he had been was fading away, overshadowed by the expectations of a world that wasn't mine. I felt trapped, without a voice or a space of my own. 2 years into our marriage, the tensions that had been simmering beneath the surface began to boil over. Richard had always been particular about our finances, but his behavior became increasingly controlling. Despite our joint accounts, I questioned every purchase he made, while he spent lavishly on himself without discussion. Did you really need another art supply set? I would ask, examining the credit card statement. That's $200 that could have been invested, I'd say, while I thought nothing of dropping thousands on a new watch or golf clubs. The disparity was overwhelming. Gradually, I found myself isolated from my friends and family. Visits to my parents in upstate New York became less frequent. There was always an excuse, a work event, a dinner with clients, or simply that my hometown was too provincial for his tastes. My college friends stopped calling after Richard made it clear they weren't sophisticated enough for his home. Your friend Laura asked if our wine was from California, scoffed after a dinner party he organized. As if we could serve domestic wine. It's embarrassing, Sofía. My career, which had once been a source of pride, became a constant battleground. When he was offered a promotion to senior designer, Richard wasn't supportive. Is the modest bump in salary worth the extra hours away from home? I questioned. We're trying to start a family soon, remember? This was news to me. Whenever he brought up having children, he always said the timing wasn't right, an excuse that repeated endlessly. It was around this time that he discovered my passion for digital marketing. The agency he worked for was expanding its services, and he volunteered to learn the analytics and the strategy aspects. He found he had an innate knack for understanding consumer behavior and creating targeted campaigns that delivered results. He felt alive again, finding a purpose beyond appearances. Excited about this new direction, he shared my idea of eventually starting my own boutique digital marketing firm with Richard. His response was crushing, like a bucket of cold water. Sofía, be realistic. Starting a business requires business acumen, which isn't exactly your strong suit. Besides, most small businesses fall within the first year. Our approaches to money highlighted our fundamental differences. Richard believed in conspicuous consumption, the right address, the right car, the right vacation spots, to maintain an image of success. With my middle-class upbringing, believed in saving, investing wisely, and finding value rather than use stick price tags. The gap between us grew wider and wider. As our third anniversary approached, Richard's late nights at work became the norm rather than the exception. Big client, market volatility, quarterly reports, his excuses varied, but his absence remained constant. He ate dinner alone most nights, went to bed alone, and increasingly lived the life of someone single, but with the financial scrutiny of a child receiving an allowance. Loneliness became my companion. Our first truly major argument came after his family's annual Christmas gathering. In the car ride home, his mother had pointedly asked when we would be giving her grandchildren. He mentioned that he was ready whenever Richard was, only to have him smoothly change the subject. When he confronted him at home, his reaction was cold, almost calculated. Children are a massive responsibility and expense, he said, loosening his tie. With your modest career and my family's expectations, any child of ours would need trust funds, private schooling, the right connections. We're not there yet financially. Not there yet? He questioned, genuinely confused. Richard, you make 7 figures. Your family has generational wealth. What are we waiting for? His response was telling and devastating. My money isn't the issue. You still haven't established yourself properly. What would you contribute to a child's future? The head of his words festered for days and weeks. His dismissive attitude toward my career, which appeared insignificant during another argument, solidified something in me. I needed financial independence, not used for myself, but for my sanity. That week, I opened a separate bank account at a different bank, a small act of silent rebellion. That same week, I opened a separate bank account, an act of silent rebellion. I set up a small direct deposit from my paycheck, not enough for Richard to notice if it checked our joint accounts. But it was enough to start building something of my own, a small nest of independence I couldn't control. It was a first step, but it felt like a giant leap. Simultaneously, I began educating myself on financial independence. I read books on investing, took free online courses on business management, and subscribed to newsletters about entrepreneurship. All of this I did in private browsing modes, careful not to leave digital breadcrumbs for Richard to discover. The woman who had once been swept off her feet by grand gestures was now awakening to the gilded cages she lived in. I was planning my escape, one small step at a time, with the determination of someone who has nothing to lose. And at the heart of my plan was a secret Richard had never imagined. My grandmother, Mrs. Eleanor, a woman of strong character and ancestral wisdom, had always told me, Sofía, true wealth is not displayed, it is cultivated in silence. She, a respected herbalist and midwife in our small town, had accumulated a modest fortune throughout her life, not from big businesses, but from the discreet sale of lands she had inherited. Lands that many considered worthless because they were far from the city, but which she knew had hidden potential, a legacy she entrusted to me years ago, before she passed away. She had left me a small property on the outskirts of New York City, an old house with extensive land, and a trust account with clear instructions. Use it when your spirit needs to fly free. Richard had always despised my modest origins, my small town family. It never occurred to him that this simple folk could possess something of real value, something beyond his comprehension. He thought my inheritance was limited to a few of my grandmother's crafts. I never suspected the extent of her foresight, nor the discretion with which she had handled her affairs. That property, that account, was my true inheritance. Not just monetary, but a symbol of the independence and long-term vision my grandmother had taught me. While Richard continued his late nights at work and his increasingly frequent business trips, he began laying the foundation for my independence, using that inheritance as my bedrock. It was the best-kept secret, my ace up my sleeve, the key to my liberation. I would never see it coming, blinded by his own arrogance and his limited perception of my worth. The gilded cage was opening, not by force, but by cunning and patience. My grandmother had given me the tools, and I was ready to use them. While Richard continued his latte nights away from home, I began laying the foundation for my independence. Using my growing separate savings and a portion of my grandmother's inheritance, I registered a small business. I named it Sofía Grand Digital Solutions, a name that reflected my identity and aspirations. I built a simple but professional website showcasing my portfolio and marketing services. My first challenge was finding time to work on my business without Richard knowing. I converted our rarely used guest bedroom into a home office. I explained to Richard that I needed a dedicated space for freelance projects to supplement our income. I barely paid attention to the change, dismissing my freelance work as a mere hobby. Just don't let it interfere with our social obligations, was his only concern, revealing his complete disinterest in my true ambitions. I still saw me as an accessory. My first client came through the stroke of luck at our local coffee shop. I overheard Patricia Smith, the owner of a struggling but beloved bakery, complaining about the quotes she received from marketing agencies. I can't afford $5,000 for a campaign, but I'm losing ground to the chain bakeries, she told the barista. I introduced myself, explained my background, and offered to help her at a fraction of the cost. The understanding was that I was building my portfolio, and she would take a chance on me. Patricia took a chance, and the results exceeded both our expectations. Her social media engagement increased by 300%. A targeted email campaign brought in new corporate catering clients. The before and after was dramatic enough that she referred me to other small business owners in her network. Working with Patricia not only gave me my first success story, but also a genuine friendship, something I had been missing in Richard's curated social circle. She was authentic, hardworking, and appreciated my skills. You have a gift, Sofía, Patricia told me over coffee one day. You understand what makes businesses special and how to communicate that to customers. I worked late nights while Richard was away on his increasingly frequent business trips. I converted our walk-in closet into a makeshift recording studio for client calls. Every new client was both exhilarating and terrifying. Exhilarating because my business was growing. Terrifying because discovery would mean confrontation, a risk I was willing to take. The learning curve was steep. I made mistakes, undercharging for complex projects or occasionally overpromising on timelines, but I learned quickly. Each client taught me something new about running a business, about setting boundaries, about valuing my own work. I used my savings and the inheritance to invest in essential equipment and software. I continued investing in essential equipment and software, carefully hiding the charges among household expenses or making cash purchases. My client list grew steadily over the course of a year. Primarily through referrals and word of mouth, my reputation spread among small and medium-sized business owners. Rather than spending the profits, I reinvested most of them back into the business. I also began setting aside a significant portion for future investments, diversifying my assets discreetly. Richard remained oblivious, attributing my increasing confidence to finally adjusting to his lifestyle. I thought he was finally adapting to being his trophy wife, rather than recognizing my professional fulfillment. His blindness was my greatest ally at that moment. A pivotal moment came when I worked with a local jewelry designer whose sales increased so dramatically after my marketing campaign that her story was featured in a small business magazine. I had to decline being mentioned by name, citing privacy reasons, but the success gave me credibility with larger clients. My anonymity was vital for the protection of my plan. Through Patricia, I met Natalie Kim, a tech entrepreneur who had sold her first startup for 8 figures and was launching a new venture. Initially hiring me for a small project, Natalie quickly became both a valued client and, more importantly, a mentor. You're charging too little for your expertise, she told me bluntly. Triple your prices and watch how your perceived value changes. She was right. When it asked my rates, instead of losing clients, it attracted more established businesses. These businesses were willing to pay for the quality and the expertise he offered. Natalie also introduced me to the world of investing beyond traditional savings accounts. Cause losses value sitting still, she explained. You need to make your money work for you. Under her guidance, I began to invest a portion of my profits in technology stocks and promising startups. I used my grandmother's inheritance as initial capital for these investments, a solid foundation that allowed me to take calculated risks. Every move was another piece in my independence puzzle. Richard, meanwhile, remained immersed in his own world of business and deception, never suspecting that the woman he thought he controlled was building an empire right under his nose. My little hobby was becoming a formidable financial force, one that would soon eclipse everything I believed it possessed. Silence was my most powerful weapon. The facade of our marriage completely crumbled when he discovered Richard's infidelity. It wasn't a dramatic revelation, but a series of small clues that came together to form a clear picture. Suspicious messages, late-night calls, and his growing disinterest in me all pointed to a relationship with Vanessa, one of his younger, ambitious colleagues. One day, while looking for a document in his home office, he found a bank statement from a secret account. The deposits were substantial and regular, and the transactions included expensive gifts for Vanessa. It wasn't just the infidelity that had, but the financial betrayal, the hypocrisy of his control over my spending while he splurged on another woman. Anger consumed me, but it turned it into determination. That same week, Richard confronted me with a divorce proposal. Sofía, this isn't working. I need someone who understands my world, not someone clinging to a modest past. He told me he wanted the house, arguing that he had bought it and he wasn't entitled to anything significant. His tone was condescending, as if he were doing me a favor. I give you a small compensation for the years, he said, with a smile that turned my stomach. But the house and most of the assets are mine. It's only fair. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral, while inside my mind was already scheming. I didn't know that he had already consulted Therese, my attorney, and that we were prepared for this moment. The house, the symbol of his control, had become the final battlegrounds. I believed that by taking the deed from me, it would take away my security, my future. But I knew that true security was not in bricks and mortar, but in the freedom I had been secretly wielding. My grandmother's inheritance had given me that foundation. Richard was so blinded by his arrogance and his desire to get rid of me that I didn't see the trap he had set. His laughter in court would be the prelude to his downfall. The signing of the house deed, an act I considered his victory, would actually be the beginning of his humiliation. Every stroke of his pen would seal his fate. My heart pounded with a mix of nervousness and a strange calm. The time had come to reveal the truth, to show the world who Sofía truly was. The day of the hearing arrived with a grey, rainy morning in New York City, a perfect reflection of the tense atmosphere in the courtroom. Richard arrived with his attorney, M.R. Lawrence, exultant and confident of his victory. Vanessa, his mistress, sat in the gallery, with a knowing smile that irritated me. But I maintained my composure, my gaze fixed on the Judge Thompson, a woman of stern expression and impeccable reputation. M.R. Lawrence presented their case for the division of assets, highlighting Richard's family wealth as separate property. I minimized my contributions to our marital assets. I suggested that the condo, purchased primarily with Richard's earnings, should remain his exclusive property. Throughout their presentation, I maintained my composure, neither reacting to Richard's fabrications nor revealing my emotions. Judge Thompson occasionally glanced my way, her expression unreadable. When it came time to sign the initial divorce decree, separating our marital status while financial matters were finalized, Richard made a show of it. signed with a flourish, a laugh escaping his lips as he kept his Mont Blanc pen. As he returned to his seat, he passed close enough to whisper, "Enjoy going back to your parents, basement. Teresa's presentation began methodically, her approach a stark contrast to Mr. Lawrence's theatrical arguments. She presented evidence of Richard's financial deceptions during our marriage. The hidden accounts, the lavish spending on Vanessa, the pattern of financial control. Your Honor, Teresa said, Mr. Sterling has not been forthcoming about the full extent of marital assets. She submitted documentation of accounts Richard had failed to disclose, including dates, account numbers, and the approximate balances. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his man expression giving way to nervous glances at his attorney. His attorney requested a brief recess, which Judge Thompson denied. I believe we should continue, Counselor. I'm particularly interested in hearing about these undisclosed assets. The atmosphere in the courtroom tensed as Teresa methodically dismantled Richard's financial deceptions. Judge Thompson's expression grew increasingly stern as the evidence mounted. Furthermore, Your Honor, Teresa continued, we request that the court consider Mrs. Sterling's separate property that was established during the marriage, but without any contribution or support from Mr. Sterling. This was the moment we had prepared for so carefully. Judge Thompson looked up from her notes. Please elaborate, Counselor. Mrs. Sterling established a digital marketing business during the marriage. Mr. Sterling not only provided no support for this venture, but actively discouraged it and belittled her professional ambitions. Teresa presented emails and text messages where Richard had dismissed my business as a hobby and had discouraged my entrepreneurial goals. Judge Thompson reviewed the documents carefully. Then, she addressed me directly for the first time. Mrs. Sterling, the court requires full financial disclosure from both parties. Have you submitted complete information about this business venture? Not yet, Your Honor, he replied, as we had planned. My complete financial statement is ready for submission today. Teresa handed the court clerk a sealed envelope containing my complete financial disclosure, the document we had strategically held back until this precise moment. I request that the court review Mrs. Sterling's financial statement before making any determinations about asset division, Teresa said. Judge Thompson nodded and opened the envelope. The courtroom fell silent as she read, her eyebrows rising slightly, the only indication of surprise from the otherwise composed judge. After what felt like eternity, Judge Thompson looked up. For the record, I will read the summary of Mrs. Sterling's assets. My heart pounded as she began to read. Sofía Grand Digital Solutions, a digital marketing firm established 3 years ago. Current valuation based on revenue and contracts, $2,200,000. Richard's head snapped up, his expression of disbelief almost comical. Investment portfolio including technology stocks and startup investments, $1,800,000. Richard gripped the table, his knuckles white. Real estate holdings, one property purchased 3 months ago, valued at $950,000. By now, Richard looked physically ill, his face drained of color, his body rigid with shock. Beside him, Mr. Lawrence was frantically whispering, but Richard seemed unable to process what he was hearing. Total assets, $6,950,000, Judge Thompson concluded. The courtroom remained silent. Richard stared at me as if seeing a stranger. In that moment, he felt no triumph, no vindication, just a profound relief that the truth was finally on record. Judge Thompson broke the silence. Mr. Sterling, do you wish to revisit any of your previous statements regarding the Mrs. Sterling's financial dependence on you? Richard seemed incapable of speech. Mr. Lawrence stood quickly. Your Honor, we weren't aware of these assets. We contend that as they were acquired during the marriage, Mr. Sterling is entitled to an equitable portion. Teresa was prepared for this argument. Your Honor, we direct the court's attention to paragraph 23 of the Sterling prenuptial agreement, which both parties signed prior to marriage. This was our ace. When reviewing our prenup years after signing, Teresa discovered that clause Richard's own lawyers had included. Any business created by either spouse during the marriage without capital investment from the other spouse would remain separate property in the event of divorce. The clause was likely included to protect Mr. Sterling's potential ventures, Teresa explained. However, the language applies equally to Mr. Sterling's business. A business which she built without any financial contribution from Mr. Sterling. Judge Thompson reviewed the prenuptial agreement, nodding slowly. The language is, indeed, clear. Ms. Washington, please continue. Teresa outlined how I had built my business from scratch, using my own savings and reinvesting profits. All while Richard actively discouraged my efforts. She presented statements from clients and my mentor Natalie, attesting to my independent work and business acumen. Throughout Teresa's presentation, I watched Richard, the man who had laughed while signing our divorce papers used an hour earlier. And now sat frozen, his confident demeanor shattered. Vanessa, who had been sitting in the gallery, slipped out of the courtroom, her expression unreadable. Judge Thompson took 30 minutes to review all documents before delivering her rulings. When she returned, her decision was clear. Based on the evidence presented and the terms of the prenuptial agreement, the court finds that Sofía Grand Digital Solutions and the resulting investment portfolio constitute separate property, belonging solely to Mr. Sterling. Richard made a strangled sound somewhere between a gasp and a protest. Furthermore, Judge Thompson continued, given Mr. Sterling's failure to fully disclose marital assets, the court is inclined to view the division of remaining marital assets in a light more favorable to Mr. Sterling. The rest of her ruling was a blur of legal terms, but the outcome was clear. I would keep my business, my investments, and my new property. Additionally, I would receive a greater portion of our marital assets due to Richard's deception. The luxury condo would be sold. Proceeds would be divided according to the judge's formula. As we stood to leave, Richard approached me, his lawyer trying unsuccessfully to hold him back. You planned this? He hissed, his face contorted with rage and humiliation. All these years, you were just waiting to take me down. He looked at the money I don't allowed. Now a stranger consumed by his own narrative of victimhood. No, Richard, he said calmly. He built something while you were busy destroying what we had. That's the difference between us. Teresa gently guided me away, leaving Richard standing alone in the empty courtroom. The remnants of his superiority complex lying in shambles around him. Walking out of the courthouse that day felt less like a victory and more like liberation. The weight of deception, both Richard's and my unnecessary secrecy, lifted from my shoulders. Richard attempted to intercept me outside, his earlier rage now replaced with an unsettling charm. Sofía, we should talk privately. I think he might have underestimated you. Perhaps we were hasty in ending things. He almost laughed at the transparency of his sudden interest in reconciliation. Now that I knew my net worth, he was once again worthy of his attention. Vanessa was nowhere to be seen. There is nothing to discuss, Richard. The court has made its decision. His smile faltered. You know I still care about you. We built a life together. All this business success you've had, we could combine forces. Think about the power couple we could be. Teresa stepped between us. Mr. Sterling, al campione question sold go through counsel from this point forward. That evening, I met Patricia, Natalie, and Teresa for dinner. We chose a quiet restaurant overlooking Central Park. We ordered champagne, not to celebrate Richard's defeat, but to toast new beginnings. To my freedom. To Sofía, Natalie raised her glass, who built an empire while a fool was looking the other way. Within a week, I moved into my new penthouse, a space I had chosen for its wall of windows. It offered spectacular city views and an open floor plan, perfect for both living and, occasionally, working. Unlike the sterile luxury of the condo I had shared with Richard, This space radiated warmth and personality. With the divorce finalized, I could finally be public about my business. I expanded from my small office to a full floor in a downtown building, hiring a team of talented marketers. They shared my vision for helping businesses authentically connect with their customers. The company grew beyond my initial dreams. By the end of the first year post-divorce, we had clients across the country. We were even looking at international expansion. I met Patricia, our Chief Operating Officer, her organizational skills and people management abilities complementing my creative and strategic focus. One of the most healing experiences was reconnecting with my family. Richard had sadly isolated me from them, making visits home difficult and often criticizing them afterward. For the first 10 years, I spent holidays upstate, laughing in my parents' kitchen, playing with my nieces and nephews, remembering the grounded values that had shaped me. We always knew you were extraordinary, my mother said during one visit. We used worried you had forgotten. Despite the professional success, the emotional aftermath of the divorce wasn't always easy. There were nights I woke up angry at the years I spent diminishing myself to fit Richard's expectations. There were moments I questioned my judgment, wondering how I had missed the red flags. Recognizing I needed help processing these feelings, I started working with a therapist specializing in recovery from manipulative relationships. Dr. Harper helped me understand the gradual nature of emotional manipulation. She taught me how even strong, intelligent people can be vulnerable. Healing isn't linear, she reminded me often. Some days you feel empowered by what you've overcome. Other days you still feel the head. Both reactions are valid. 6 months after the divorce, I used a portion of my resources to establish the Sofía Grant Financial Literacy Foundation for Women. It focused on helping women achieve economic independence, particularly those coming out of controlling or abusive relationships. We offered grants, mentorship, and practical education about money management and entrepreneurship. The foundation became a platform for speaking at women's business conferences about financial literacy and independence. Standing at podiums across the country, sharing my story and the lessons learned. I found purpose in transforming my painful experience into guidance for others. Financial independence isn't just about money, became my message. It's about having the freedom to make choices based on your values rather than necessity or fear. Almost exactly a year after our divorce was finalized, I encountered Richard at a charity gala. I was attending with Natalie. He looked older, less polished than I remembered. He approached cautiously, his new date, not Vanessa, hovering uncertainly nearby. You look well, Sofía, he said, his tone lacking the confidence that once defined him. I hear your company is doing remarkable things. It is, I replied simply. I never really saw it, he admitted after an awkward pause. Your potential. I was so focused on molding you into what I thought a wife should be that I missed who you actually were. I studied the money I'd once built my life around. Feeling neither hat nor love, used a distant compassion for someone who measured worth in such limited ways. I hope you find what you're looking for, Richard, he said sincerely, before rejoining Natalia and the others at our table. Later that night, in the quiet of my home, I reflected on the strange journey. What had seemed like the ultimate rejection, Richard's infidelity and cruel dismissal, had become the catalyst for my liberation. His attempt to discard me had forced me to rediscover my own value. I began dating again, eventually approaching relationships with healthier boundaries and a clearer sense of my non-negotiables. I no longer felt the need to contort myself to fit someone else's expectations. The right person would appreciate me for exactly who I was, accomplishments and flaws alike. My life now isn't perfect. No life ever is, but it's authentically mine. Every decision, from the clients I accept to the art on my walls, reflects my values rather than someone else's expectations. The net worth that's chucked Richard in that courtroom continues to grow. But more importantly, so does my sense of purpose and peace. If you regret watching this and facing your own crossroads of rejection or underestimation, remember that sometimes what seems like an ending is actually a beginning in disguise. Your worth isn't determined by someone else's inability to see it. Have you ever had someone underestimate you only to prove them wrong? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that their value isn't defined by anyone else's perception. Thank you for listening to my journey.